Come and watch till the end. A dinner party outside a home begins the narrative. It is Nick's birthday. Nick's mom addresses his dad's lateness in her speech. Nick rises to cut his face-shaped cake. He is adorable and bikes to school. He did homework for someone at school. After handing the man the assignment, his girlfriend creeps up on him and asks if he can come to a party tomorrow night, but he claims he will be busy. 2 men and a female attempt to acquire money from this person who owes them. Pete, Nick's closest friend, was scratched. Nick advises Pete to stand up for himself. Nick defends Pete when he claims he can't. He repays Pete and whispers, "He said, 'You are so broken, dude,' to Annie." Annie caught him after a few seconds. After punching him in the face, they wait to see the principal and have a chat. She tells him he is not better than her since he sells essays. He admits that he's a hypocrite. Then the principal comes and sends Annie home. Then he turns to Nick and tells him to stop wasting his time on lost souls like Annie Newton. "She has no future, you don't let us down," he says, and Nick's only reply is, "Can I leave now?" Then we see Annie back home. Her stepmother has made her brother dinner, so she confronts her about it. This causes an argument between her dad and stepmom, but Annie just goes upstairs and makes a sandwich for her brother Victor. Victor asks her if she'll be going out tonight, and she says yes. You can see the boy's mood change. Over at Nick's house, we see Pete arrive and tease him about getting beat up by a girl. Relatable. He now asks Nick about that same party, and Nick says he won't even be around by tomorrow. He'll be in London for the writers program. His mom doesn't even know, but he's going anyway. According to him, she's always trying to micromanage him and be on top of everything, but he's not going to let her have this one. Now we see Andy get in a car with her boyfriend Marcus, and they're off to rob a jewelry store, and he smashes the glass, grabs some jewelry, runs back to the Mercedes which Marcus just stole, and he drives off. The next morning, and he gets ready for school and is leaving with the bag. She ignored Marcus' request to leave the bag. He acted after she said he wouldn't. He dialed 911. A rat. Annie placed the bag in her school locker. Pete glared at her as she closed the locker. The officers checked her locker and discovered a jeweler. She was detained. She called Marcus. After the call, she leaves the station determined to avenge the person she was sure handed her in to the police. After Pete says farewell to Nick, we head to Nico's home, where his mom has learned about his London ticket. She confronts him when the airline calls to modify his travel schedule. She points out that he has had the ticket for weeks, so Nick is in his room getting ready to depart. He pockets a watch. Someone hits Pete as he runs. Annie's boys escort him to Annie. She hits him because she feels he has betrayed her. He confesses out of desperation. Nick asked his lady at the party if she wanted to fly to London with him since his flight was delayed. He hands her their ticket and wishes her well. He is not a snake. He believed Nick would have left the country by now. Pete exits the automobile and explains his actions, but no one is listening. He grabs Nick and demands, "Who is broken now?" "You are," Nick says. Nick has balls. They bury him after a couple more blows and a heavy kick to the face kill him. Nick's watch slips unnoticed. Before, Pete was forgivable. He informs Marcus. She says she applauded the man who sold her out, and he has a shotgun mark on his face because he knows it was not him. He is now wondering why she came to him knowing he was on parole. "Annie, why'd you come here?" he asked and sent her away. She feels betrayed. "Wait till you find out that he is the one who sold you out." She smashes some stuff in his workshop, gives him an ironic kiss, and leaves. Then, early the next morning, we see her burning her clothes from last night. You will not believe what we see next. Nick, he walks out of the woods looking clean and fresh, walks to school and sits in class, but no one can see him because he is invisible and relatable, so even though he is sitting right there, can hear everything they are saying. They use that opportunity to say some things about him, including his girl, who calls him pretentious and says he is always trying to make himself feel important. Then he shouts out to his mom. He can hear her talking to the detectives about him, but she cannot hear him. He is running home now. On his way, he clambers into someone in the school hallway, gets hit by a car, and gets run over by a truck. But nothing really happens in real life. He gets home and sees detectives all around his house doing everything to find him. He tries to put his mother out of her misery by telling her he is dead, but of course she can't. The romp is on the roof, questioning what she was doing last night, and Nick is there to monitor her lies. But he also finds out that Annie slapped him because she felt he ratted her out and pushes her off the roof, which does not work. The detectives take a search party out to the woods where Nick's body was dumped, and Annie calls Pete and tells him to be there. Nick hears that and gets visibly sick. He's in his room now, and he can see his mom come in and go through his stuff. She's reading a poem he wrote. He's reading along with her. His pet bird joins him in invisible paradise. He holds it in his hands, and after some seconds, it disappears. It's a revelation for him. He says, "I'm alive." And he runs straight to where his body was dumped. He's trying to get the search party to find him, but he's not having much luck with the humans. The dog, however, first seemed like he could see Nick, but he turned away at the last second. The dog helped find Nick's watch, though now Peter's reporting to Annie and the rest of the gang. He feels they'll soon be found out, so he says he'll go to report to the police, and he tells him if he reports he goes to jail too. Meanwhile, Nick is there listening to everything, and he now sneaks back into her house, and she's trying to pack up her stuff and run away. Victor wakes up and begs if she will go forever like Mom. He cries. This guy softens her rock-hard exterior. She wisely advises Victor not to be like her. She leaves when her dad instructs her to, but she promises to return and clap for her younger brother if something happens to him. Choppers and an ambulance join the woodland hunt. Nick has 2 or 3 days left, according to a specialist. Nick's torso and fingers move, proving he is alive. The cop Brian goes to speak with Marcus and asks him if he was with Annie on Tuesday night, to which he replies yes. He then asks him if he was with her the night before when she robbed the jewelry store, to which he replies no. Brian knows Marcus has been on parole for 8 months, but he does not stress that too much. He drops his card and tells Marcus to call him if he sees Annie because he wants to talk to her about a missing person. Nick is yelling at his mom and shaking her, spilling everything on the table and slamming a chair through the window, but none of it really occurs. His mom begins sobbing and yelling Nick's name a few minutes later. Marcus grabs Pete in the downpour and places a pistol to his chest. Marcus lies to Pete about the cops pursuing him. He shows Pete where the corpse was placed in the woods. The following day, Marcus attempts to fool Annie into going to a spot to clap her, but she uses something and phones Pete to go instead. She refused to wake up for Nick. Detective Kate pursued Pete. Pete is on the bridge with the 2 men as Annie watches from a distance, but Marcus arrives from behind her and places a pistol in her back, taking her to the bridge where the rest of the guys are and telling Pete to go home. He rushes home, happy to be asked. Marcus says they have to move fast because Pete has a tail, and he is correct. But the police are already here, and Ethan takes a shotgun for Marcus and points it at the officers, but they are surrounded now. But Annie has one heck of a survivor and climbs out and escapes. Peter Parker would be very proud while she is running away. Nick screams, "We'll catch you, Annie." And it seems like she heard him because she turns around and yells something, so Nick goes, "She heard me." She goes to a club and sells a ring that belonged to Marcus to some guy. After he pays her, she decides to stay back and do a little dancing. She takes off her hoodie and beanie and is now doing the signature white woman dance while Nick is just watching her the next day. Yet she leaves. She sneaks into school at night to place money for Victor in her locker. Nick tells her he is dying, and she is the only one who can rescue him. He yells her name in her brain, and she turns around but sees no one. She is unhappy, so Nick does not look while she showers. Harry will be ghostly and oversleeping or not sleeping at all. Well, now that we visit Annie and Nick's home, she is going through his old photographs and becoming sentimental. Nick is happy as his corpse decays in that pit. But Nick's mom destroys any romanticism, and he hurries out of the home and directly towards the woods to where they dump Nick's body and Viola. The body is not there. Nick tells Annie that someone moved his body and asks her to thank them. She sees the substances she found with Pete days earlier and realizes that Pete was here, so she goes after Pete at school. Pete tells her that Nick did not even rat her out in the first place, and he confesses that he and Marcus moved the body. She ambushes him in his car outside a police station. Then she takes him to a precipice and tells him to go on his knees for a role reversal moment. Then she points a gun at him while Pete is trying to self-delete. Nick is begging him not to do it, but Pete cannot even hear a thing. But here's the beautiful thing. While Pete is in that transition zone where he is not dead but not fully alive, he sees Nick, and they can see and talk to each other. Nick is now asking Pete where he moved the body at the same time, and he is asking Marcus the same question. They both answer at the same time. After they do, Pete's parents rush into his room and find him in the state he is in, and Annie just leaves Marcus and turns around to go find Nick. But not clapping him turns out to be a bad idea because Marcus stands up and shoots her. She does not die, though she has enough in her to shoot him and stand up and call detect. Kate orders the guards to seal the gates and search for Nick. Everyone rushes to Brian. They hurry him into an ambulance as Annie watches. She gets into her vehicle and blacks out while bleeding. In the evening, a policeman awakens her and orders her out of the vehicle, but she drives away. As predicted, they chase her to the hospital. Nick's mother watches doctors rescue him. Annie gets caught by the police, but Nick's voice in her thoughts whispers, "I need you, Annie, I need you," which motivates her. She accelerates past the police barrier. She takes her turn after parking the automobile. Naturally, the hospital where his body is being operated on, Nick's mother says you have nerve when she sees her. Nick tries to play peacemaker, but Mama can't hear you, so Annie has to do it all on her own. She says she just has to talk to Nick, but Nick's mom lands a slap on her face, and he then tells her that Nick is here, that she can feel him and hear him, that she knows what he wants. Of course, she doesn't believe her, so on Nick's directive, and he tells Nick's mom about that time she was in his room reading his poems and how he was with her, that she now asks Annie what she wants, and then he says she just needs to see Nick, she can help him, but his mom says no, and he hands for her gun and says she knows she can bring him back. She finally lets her go in, and he is now running her fingers through Nick's body. She apologizes to him and begs him not to go. She takes off her necklace, which once belonged to her mom, puts it in his hand while she joins him on the bed and snuggles with him. When she does that, the invisible neck disappears, and the real Nick wakes up and calls Annie's name, and he says she wanted to do one good thing, and Nick tells her she did, she saved him. Then Annie taps out. Then we see Victor playing with a toy plane, and Nick shows up and has a conversation with him. Victor says his sister died, and Nick says they should send her a message. Nick writes and flies Victor's brief message, "Hey Annie," aboard the aircraft. The end.